Pete Hegseth is going to jail. And when it finally happens, I want everybody to come back to this video and just say, you were right. A couple of things are taking place. Congress is finally deciding to do their job of oversight for this administration that has ignored the rule of law, be it domestically or internationally. And they are looking into what the Department of Defense did with these boats that they attacked in the Caribbean.
Pete Hegseth is definitely going to jail, but Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, won't be joining him. You might be saying comparing a war criminal to a financial CEO is a bit of a stretch, Mia. Stay with me on this. Pete Hegseth is actively committing war crimes in the Southern Caribbean off the coast of Venezuela because he is following every single order that his big orange daddy is telling him, thinking, I'm just going to say I was following orders, not a valid defense. You can look up Nuremberg. Jamie Dimon, on the other hand, put thought into what his company did, what they were tied to, because Jamie Dimon is a known Trump supporter and defender, but JP Morgan did not donate to the Trump ballroom because he said, you know what, future administrations may not look too favorably on folks like us. It could be seen as a bribe, and you know what? He's not wrong. And side note, how optimistic of him. Now, I know Jamie Dimon might be an absolute turd muffin of a human being, but he's not stupid. He wants to keep his reputation intact, his fortune intact, and the reputation of JP Morgan intact. Wow, look at all of that critical thinking going to work, whereas Pete Hegseth doesn't think he's going to have to face any accountability whatsoever. I have bad news for him. Only Trump technically has immunity in the United States. Hegseth does not, and I was following orders, didn't work at Nuremberg, and it's really not going to work at Nuremberg Part 2. And that day will come. It will come, people. It may take some time, but it will get here.
Hi guys, my name is Mercy and you're welcome back to the channel. You know, there is a moment in every political drama when the people who create the chaos finally started reaping over it. And that's exactly what we are watching right now. House Republicans, the same ones who spent years defending Trump and amplifying Pete Hegseth, are suddenly announcing an investigation into both of them. So guys, let's watch some clips. We'll come back to talk more. And if you have not subscribed to my channel, please do so for more informations.
We have some major news. House Republicans have just announced that they are investigating Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth for their possible war crimes, citing that Washington Post report. This order that Pete Hegseth gave to, quote, kill them all regarding a boat in the Caribbean is now being investigated by the Senate and the House. The House Armed Services Committee Chairman Mike Rogers and Ranking Member Adam Smith issued the following joint statement saying, quote, this committee is committed to providing rigorous oversight of the Department of Defense's military operations in the Caribbean. We take seriously the reports of follow-on strikes on boats alleged to be ferrying narcotics in the Southcom region and are taking bipartisan action to gather a full accounting of the operation in question. And this comes after Republican Senator Roger Wicker on the same committee in the Senate put out a similar statement saying that they are investigating this. Look, when Republicans are acknowledging this report and saying that there needs to be an investigation, that's how you know it's bad. A lot of these MAGA elected officials are not sweeping this under the rug, and they actually want to learn more. You have former military attorneys coming out saying a crime was committed, former military officials saying a crime was committed. This deserves an investigation. We need answers.
A large group of lawyers has concluded that the Trump administration is guilty of war crimes and murder. Democrats and Republicans in Congress have responded by launching, and I quote, vigorous investigations into it. These headlines continue to get crazier by the day. Here's everything you need to know. This is Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump's Secretary of War, and Mr. Hegseth has been ordering the military to bomb and kill suspected drug traffickers on boats in the Southern Caribbean. And one of these strikes, conducted in September, didn't kill everybody on board. In fact, it left 2 men hanging on for their lives off of the piece of the now blown up boat. And according to the Washington Post, Pete Hegseth gave an order to kill them all. So our military followed up their first strike with a second, designed to specifically target and kill these 2 men that were now incapacitated and serve no threat to the United States of America. Following this reporting, a large group of former military lawyers unanimously concluded that this would be considered a war crime if we're technically in an international armed conflict. And if we're not, they said it'd be lawfully considered murder, and that Pete Hegseth, as well as those operating under him who executed these commands, could face legal prosecution for doing so. As of filming this video, multiple congressmen and women, both Republican and Democratic, in the House of Representatives and the Senate have officially announced that they have launched investigations into these strikes to determine their legality. This all leaves a very big question. Will the Trump administration be held accountable for these heinous actions? And personally, I'm not too confident. They have a track record of escaping accountability for these kinds of things. But that's all for now. I'll keep you updated as we learn more.
They're asking them, can you prove that these were drug traffickers? And even if they were drug traffickers, the penalty for that is not war. It's not targeting these boats with military action, denying them due process. So because Pete can't verify if these were even drug traffickers and these possibly were civilians, and it clearly appears that he decided to eliminate any witnesses, because if people lived, if there were civilians that lived to tell the story and say no one on that boat was a drug trafficker, these were all civilians, then the lies that they consistently tell you to demonize Latinos would make no sense. If these were civilians and the United States government, the Department of Defense, were targeting civilians that weren't even coming to the United States, they were just doing their jobs fishing. It also explains why Trump is trying to invade Venezuela. The Venezuelan government can gather evidence on these people that were killed by the United States government in these airstrikes on these boats, talking to the families, talking to the industry that they were attached to, proving in the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court that these people were just civilians that the United States killed for no fucking reason. So of course Trump is going to do everything in his power to try to get a loyalist into that office, because that will kill any investigation done to unmask the truth. And this is not even me ignoring the nuances of what's happening in Venezuela, because that man in charge of Venezuela is also targeting civilians. You know, I don't believe in these black and white arguments that a lot of people online believe in. There are nuances to these things that should be examined. So what's currently happening in Congress is a bipartisan inquiry into Pete Hegseth in the Department of Defense is taking shape. And what will end up happening is Donald Trump will probably fire him and he will go to jail. He will go to jail. It might not happen now because Donald Trump will do everything in his power to protect him, but it will definitely happen in the future. Just give it some time. Just give it some time. All of these people, a lot of these people attached to the Trump administration are going to jail. That includes the ICE director. That includes the Homeland Security director. All of these people are going to jail.
Allow me to paint a clearer picture for you. Pete Hegseth is going to prison. Let me say it again. Pete Hegseth is going to prison. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, maybe not in the next 3 years, but at some point, Pete Hegseth will serve prison time. He is committing war crimes. War crimes are something that Yahtzees were held accountable for. Okay? That's the level we're talking about. In relation to that, I want to ask the open-ended question, why would our president take to the internet today and exclaim that the Venezuelan airspace should be considered closed, indicating that the United States might strike Venezuela in light of recent rumors that we were going to go in by land or sea or something like that? Why would he do that? Because Pete Hegseth is committing war crimes by saying things like, kill them all. When we're talking about human beings in boats, not verifying who they are, not verifying if they have drugs on board, etc. He's just killing people on boats in the ocean. That is a problem. That is illegal. That is a war crime. That is something that the Yahtzees were held on trial and ultimately for. Donald Trump is making you look over there when you need to be looking over here. And on top of that, he has like narcissistic rage right now because he can't fire Pete Hegseth. Why can't he fire Pete Hegseth? Because then he would have to admit that his pick was wrong. And narcissists, they can never admit that they are wrong. So they're just going to like ride this wave, throw a bunch of chaotic statements out there. I would expect this week coming up for Donald Trump to escalate in his insanity, all for the sake of I don't know, exclaiming that he's right when he knows he's not. Just take a beat, take a breath. And when you're worried, remind yourself Pete Hegseth will go to prison, for sure.
Well, we know why they lost their minds when those 6 lawmakers reminded troops that they could refuse unlawful orders, that a Nuremberg defense wasn't valid, and that they could face personal responsibility for any crimes they commit. See, regardless of what you think of those men on the boats in the Caribbean that they're blowing out of the water or what they're doing on those boats, ordering to kill all of them when they cannot fight and they pose no imminent threat of attack to the United States is illegal. Even if we were actually at war with those traffickers, which we're not, it would still then be an order to show no quarter, aka a war crime. Which is why the United Kingdom decided a few weeks ago to stop sharing intelligence with the United States about these trafficking boats in the Caribbean because they did not want to be complicit in the United States military's illegal strikes on these boats. And they're not alone. Canada and Colombia have also stopped sharing intelligence for the same reasons. See, they had to make that video to remind the troops that when Trump is long gone and Hegseth and all the rest of the inner circle are sitting and hiding in Argentina or Saudi Arabia or Russia, the troops that were responsible for carrying out their orders will be sitting in prison.
News just broke that members of the U.S. military committed literal war crimes on the express orders of Pete Hegseth. And the details of what they did and what he ordered them to do are so bad that it is now all but certain that Americans will be prosecuted for these crimes. Earlier today, the Washington Post reported that in September, Pete Hegseth explicitly ordered SEAL Team 6 to every individual aboard a boat off of the coast of Venezuela. Hegseth was very clear at the time about his expectations. He didn't want any survivors left alive. But after the smoke had cleared following the initial missile strike, at least 2 survivors could be seen clinging to the wreckage. And that is when this man, Admiral Frank Mitch Bradley, ordered a second strike to ensure that the survivors were also. But fun fact, that's a war crime. You can't double tap survivors. And all of it was captured on video. A video that the Pentagon is now refusing to show to members of Congress, despite a bipartisan request from the Senate Armed Services Committee for them to do so. And just imagine how bad that video has to be if they won't even show it to other Republicans. And here's the thing, y'all. The Trump administration argues that the United States is now at war with the cartels, and that as a result, the use of lethal force in the form of missile strikes is totally legal, y'all. They have to argue this, of course, because the president would otherwise be ordering extrajudicial attacks on civilians, which is illegal. But by framing these strikes as happening within the context of an armed conflict, Trump might have protected himself legally, but he also ensured that service members are beholden to a set of legal standards that Pete Hegseth is ordering them to disregard. And as a result, those service members can now be prosecuted for war crimes. International laws for armed conflict, which the U.S. military obviously has to follow, dictates that enemy combatants who are seriously injured can't be executed. Essentially, the instant that it becomes clear that the person you're fighting, your opponent, has no way of fighting back, you cannot them. You can capture them, you can prosecute them, but you cannot them. In other words, all of the legal framework that the Trump administration has spent months building around themselves to give Trump the right to order those strikes, yeah, that framework does everything to protect Trump himself, but it does nothing to protect the service members carrying out the strikes. And some of those service members are now going to learn the hard way that I was just following orders don't mean jack shit when you're the one on trial, friend.
So let's call it what it is. Not courage, not accountability, but depression. And it is a reminder that when you build your own power on misfortune and chaos, you will eventually drown in it. This is not about justice finally being served. This is about a political movement collapsing under its own contradictions. And honestly, it's long overdue.